Hello, Greg. Welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much. Very, very happy to be here.
Awesome. So, ReadMe, super cool company. Tell us, what is it that you guys do and who do you serve?
Sure. So this is a podcast about product market fit. So I'll give you two pitches, kind of, what we do and what gets me really excited. So definitely early on, what people use this for was API documentation. My background is engineering and design, and I've always been really excited about how do we make it easy for developers to use APIs. I'm not sure how familiar you are with APIs or your audience or anything like that, but basically APIs are how different websites, companies, et cetera, can transfer data back and forth. And what it practically looks like is it's basically a URL you go to, and rather than a website, you get structured data, usually in JSON, but other stuff. And it seems really simple when I describe it, but it's incredibly painful, and there's so many things that can go wrong. So my goal has always been to how do we make APIs easier to use? And I started with documentation because that's what people see. That's the UI UX for an API, because an API is kind of this like mythical thing that's out there that you really can't see, like most developer tools. And the documentation is kind of how do you how can you understand that, how do you use it, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we've historically done as documentation, and we still do, and we've always done other stuff as well. But if you go to our website, it says like we do API documentation because that's what people are looking for. But what really gets me excited is not being the best place to write paragraphs of text on the internet, but rather how do we make it so that people can easily use an API. So anything under that umbrella of like it makes the API easier to use is something I get really excited about. So basically, to sum it all up, we do like developer.whatever.com for thousands of websites, and it's the developer portal, developer hub that anyone trying to build on top of that product will go to.
Fantastic. So everybody should be familiar with APIs. It's the language with which systems and applications talk to each other, and you're able to, like you said, pull data from other systems. What you're empowering specifically is that the documentation and the interactivity of documentation, right? So previously it was kind of the static document, and with ReadMe, there's a much more robust experience for a developer that's trying to build an API. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when I started to program many, many years ago, I learned from books. So O'Reilly was a company that did a ton of books. There's a bunch of other books out there. And the thing about books is that it knows nothing about you or me. It doesn't know who's reading it. So it has to give way too much context and then go way too in depth and stuff like that. And it doesn't know who you are. And any sort of debugging, which is a huge part of engineering. It's like, well, maybe this is happening. Maybe this is happening. It's kind of like giving you a bunch of options and you kind of figure it out. And then computers came. Computers were already around, but then, as we started moving more away from books and more into like documentation, which is online, people are always connected. We moved documentation online. But we kept the very same kind of like mentality around it, which is like it's structured the same way. It has, doesn't know who you are, stuff like that. I think that I've always kind of felt that like everything on the internet's kind of, progressed and knows who you are. Like if you linger on an Instagram ad, all of a sudden 80, people out there know what you like, and you're like, oh, he's looking for a vacuum. So we sell ads to it. And now I don't want to do things for evil like that, or maybe it's not evil, but I don't want to use it for that. But like, we know so much about people that I always felt that it was, a great chance to tailor the documentation to each individual person. So like, I know what language you're using, or I know, rather than saying like, here's 30 things that could be wrong. Like if we can actually see your API logs, we can help you debug and help you figure it out and help you debug. And then maybe that falls apart and help you get in touch with a support person to debug and stuff like that. So I've always felt like it's weird that documentation is so static when we do actually know so much about each user, and like, how can we tailor the documentation or whatever other information that you want to get to someone. And again, sometimes it is paragraphs of text. Sometimes it is lots and lots of text. It's describing things, it's explaining things. But I've always felt that there's so many different ways, and we shouldn't just kind of be beholden to this concept of like, chapters and pages and stuff like that. So, or categories and pages or whatever you want to call it as you transfer from analog to digital. But I've always just felt there's more to it. So we still do documentation. I always think we will. And I think it's incredibly important so people can read and stuff like that. But there's been so many cool stuff that we've layered on top of it that I think gets me really excited.
Very cool. So the example of Stripe, I think, as one that built a company really on the back of great APIs, great documentation, really developer-friendly tools. Was that an inspiration to you when you were starting ReadMe? And is that kind of the go-to example of a company that really excelled in that space?
Yeah, not yes and no. So I had the idea for ReadMe in 2008 at my first internship. It wasn't called ReadMe at the time; it was called anything. It was called. I just made up names over the years. And for like years, it was kind of my white whale of like this thing that I always wanted to do. But there's just so many reasons why I didn't or couldn't, or various reasons. Some are legitimate, some are just excuses. And it was just something I've always like really felt was fascinating, interesting because it always, as a designer and engineer, I'm not a great visual designer. I'm passable, but what I really care about is the user experience and the developer experience around APIs. Like that's what gets me really excited is how do you take these like complicated, complex tools? Because there's tons of people out there who care about UX and design, and I've done a phenomenal job of apps and stuff like that. And I always felt that developer tools were a little bit different, where as everything around it got better, there was this is years ago, not anymore, but years ago, there was this mentality that like developers don't want pretty things, or they don't want easy to use things, or they want like, and I don't think that was ever true. I think it was just that they were able to figure stuff out. So that was kind of like a checkbox, like, they'll get it. We'll just send them like some like rough documentation or they'll figure it out. And they would. So there was not a huge incentive to make it better and better. But I've been fascinated for years about this problem. So that was 2008. I kind of had the idea. In 2012, I'd have to look up when Stripe launched, probably earlier than that. I'd say probably like around 2010 if I had to guess, but
I think it was around 2009, 2010.
2009, 2010, yeah. So, as that was kind of what really helped. So Stripe was what both helped me kind of like really both understand myself how important it was, but also going to investors. It made it so much easier. So I tried to raise money for it, a few years prior to when I actually started ReadMe. Didn't go well at all, which is totally fine. That was more on me than it was on investors. But once, and I kind of always hate saying like, we're just like, Stripe stocks as a service. Like that feels so, I don't love that framing. I'll never use that framing for the most part. But what I do really like about it is it was great when I was raising money. Like all of a sudden I could point to a company where like the documentation really actually made a difference. And that kind of changed everything for us. So this is a problem that I cared about long before Stripe came along, but like Stripe definitely gave it the kind of like that like, not quite product market fit, but the like idea market fit could be a good way to put it long before we had any traction.
Yeah, I love that. And you have a fascinating journey that got you to where you are today. And I'd love to come back to that in a minute, but I want to linger a little bit more on the developer tools. Developers are a unique breed. Having worked with and been part of teams with engineers and developers, selling to developer tools. How is that different from traditional SaaS or other products? What have you learned along the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of got really lucky that I got lucky in a lot of ways. I think though that there's a lot of good ideas out there, but there's a lot fewer ideas that people will pay for and can justify paying for. There's a lot of things where it's just like scratching an itch. Now, people always say developers are really hard to sell to, and I both don't know if that's true and also think that that's kind of it doesn't look at the full picture. Like if you look at a company like Stripe, a lot of people consider Stripe a developer tool, and clearly people are very happy to pay for that. They're worth, and they don't really pay for Stripe for the most part. It's a small part, but like people pay for Twilio, people pay for code editors, people pay for Copilot, stuff like that. I think developers are just slightly more rational buyers than other buyers for the most part. And I don't think they're hard to sell to. I think you just have to kind of make sure that, I think developers get really turned off by things that seem too markety or too scammy. Like I think being honest and transparent is the best way to win over developers. Like just showing code snippets, like what do you actually do? I don't think they respond well, or I don't respond well to like, we're a blah, blah, blah platform for blah. And I don't even know what those words are, but like they set like those like 3-letter acronyms or whatever.
Fill in the blanks.
Exactly. I think that developers, there's a few things that like, and this is not always true, but like I think that a lot of times you want something that actually like helps in production, that makes people's lives easier, stuff like that. And the last thing I'll say is that I think a lot of times when you sell to developers, most of our customers actually aren't developers. We're a tool for developers, but we sell to mostly product managers, product marketing managers, things like that, and then they cater to developers. So, for example, if I was selling to company A, company A might not be, the person who buys us might not be completely technical, but their customers are technical. So I think sometimes just finding the right people to sell to. There's a lot of great buyers. Individual developers don't tend to be great buyers because they have a few mentalities. One is, NIH is called Not Invented Here syndrome. And that's this concept of, I could do that in 2 days. And we hear that that's our base competitor is people like a developer being like, I could do this in like 3 days. And that's for a lot of things, that's completely true to kind of get to a baseline. And I've both been like, I've saved a lot of money and also been burned many times by kind of building stuff ourselves at ReadMe. And each company has to decide what is important to them, what's, to focus on and stuff like that. But you can't rebuild everything. So overcoming that's a big hurdle. And I think the other problem is that developers just don't tend to understand how businesses work when it comes to buying. When I was a developer, my only job before this was, intern a few places, and then I worked at Mozilla, which is a nonprofit. And like, I genuinely couldn't imagine going to my boss and being like, "Hey, I want to spend $30,000 this year on this thing." It was just like, even if my boss would have said, even if I know now that I probably could have made a case for it, like at that time, that is just, developers are kind of meant to be, they're trained to be very self-sufficient, to like figure things out on their own, to build things, to like understand how things work and stuff like that. Kind of that intercompany politics where you're trying to like, be a buyer isn't something that's a skill that is learned or rewarded or anything like that. So I think there's a bad buyer because, the truly bottoms up is really hard to do as well. And yeah, so I think those are two of the major ones. So I think just being very thoughtful about like, is this something people will actually pay for? Because a lot of times people in YC parlance, Paul Graham had an article, he called it like sitcom startups, which was like all your friends will say, yeah, it's a really good idea, and I really like it because there's so many like things that pass. It's called a sitcom startup because if you're watching a sitcom and the character said, I started a company and we do X for Y or something like that, like it doesn't take you out of the sitcom. You're like, yeah, that's sure. But if no one actually wants to use it, that's really tough. So I think kind of being honest with yourself around that's really tough. And yeah, just finding the right buyer inside the company. Because like I said, like, true bottoms up sales doesn't tend to work. But there's like a level you can find that works really well for developer tool companies.
Interestingly, some of the biggest successes in bottom up sales or product led sales, you think of Slack, right? And they targeted developers early on because of, I think it's because of the way that developers are really embedded in certain communities, and they're really like you said, they don't trust marketing as much as they trust each other. So if you're authentic and you have good word of mouth, whether it's on Reddit or other communities, they tend to adopt it through those networks. Speaking of community, I know that's something that you've been working on, and also with the conference that you put on every year. What is it called? The mixtape?
API mixtape, yeah.
API mixtape. There you go. Tell me how that's helped with ReadMe's growth.
Yeah. Okay. So it started because, again, remember, like, as a developer and all that, I'm not used to spending money or anything like that. Like when someone comes to me and is like, let's spend a lot of money, I'm like, okay, let's hold up here. And, this is exactly, this is the not invented here syndrome. Years ago, our head of sales, Dave, VP of sales, Dave, he came to me and was like, all right, I want to sponsor a booth at AWS. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And he's like, okay, it's going to be, and he said the largest number I'd ever heard. It was like $40,000. And I was like, we could do our own conference for that. Cause we're getting like a booth that was like, you could fit a laptop on, and that was literally it, for $40,000. And I was like, we can do our own conference for that. And he's like, oh, there's no way. And I'm like, let's try it. So we started a conference and we called it API Mixtape. Yeah, it's been phenomenal. It's hard to kind of track the growth, of course. Like I can't be like, oh, well, we made X from it, but like the number of new customers who have mentioned they found out of us from it, the number of employees that have started where like their first introduction to ReadMe was this conference, the amount of like just like ideas that came from it, or like stuff like that. It's been really great. I call it API Mixtape because there's two reasons. One is I always think that APIs are similar to, those old 90s mixtapes that used to have where like you put a bunch of different songs on it and like combined it would be better than the sum of its parts would be better. And mixtapes are like that, but so are websites. We all use kind of the same APIs out there, and we mix and match them in different ways and like end up with very different companies. So I thought that fit really well as kind of the motif and the message, because it wasn't about like the pipes and the stuff that went into it. It's more about like the end result, which I think's, always more fascinating for me. And I think a lot of dev tools get too in the weeds on like the technical stuff, and that's really great for a lot of them. But we try to kind of care more about the end result as opposed to all the like the plumbing and the piping. And the second thing is it was music related, so it was an excuse to like hire musicians and comedians eventually and magicians and stuff like that, and do a lot of really cool stuff, and not just be a bunch of talk tracks that kind of say the same thing over and over again. I figured if we were going to do a conference, it had to be different than everyone out there, because otherwise we're just kind of like, it's just a conference with our name on it, and that's the only difference. And yeah, it's been great for so many different things. I can't even tell you like what the best takeaway was, because there's just been like a lot of different random things. But yeah, we've done 3 of them so far. We'll probably do another one in a year and a half or so from now. And yeah, they've been a lot of fun.
Yes, so fun. I saw videos on YouTube, and you've created custom music as well, different songs
Yeah,
for the event. We'll try to link to some of those. I thought
perfect.
those were hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, I my biggest skill that I don't have is musical, and that's been my the nice thing about running a company is I have a decent enough budget that I can put towards hiring like artists, musicians, stuff like that. So almost all our events, even like internal events, we always hire musicians and stuff like that to come and just play and all that. And it's been one of my favorite things about running a company is I got a little bit of extra money to, and it all like goes towards valuable things. It's not like it's just like throwing a party or something like that, but being able to hire like all sorts of artists to be a part of it has been one of my favorite things about running a company.
Very cool. Yeah. Any particular takeaways or something memorable that you learned putting on these events, or as it relates to building the community around ReadMe? Any learnings that stand out in your memory right now?
Um, Nothing big jumps out other than it always amazes me how many people I meet later in life that I've crossed paths with years and years ago. I think that especially like whenever we do conferences, we always try to attribute signups and et cetera to the conference to understand like, okay, do we make our money back or not? And we do a decent job of kind of like, oh yeah, we got 3 deals from this conference or whatever else. But I just am always amazed by how many people like I'll run to, like even in a job interview where I'm interviewing someone, they'll be like, oh, like we met like 6 years ago at this thing or whatever. And I think you need to do both. You can't just have fun and not care about anything else. Otherwise, you're just kind of laundering money through your company and throw parties. So you still need to be thoughtful about how you connect with the community and all that. But and I think the interesting thing too is like very few companies have a community, like a true community of people who like, wear the t-shirts and are like, I'm part of the X community. I think every company wishes that they could have that community. So community doesn't mean like, the same people who come to everything. And there always is like people who do come to everything and like really, really like you. But there's so many people who just like, just anything you put out there just like resonates with someone randomly, or they'll email you about it or DM you about it weeks later or months later because they remembered it, or you cross paths with them. And I've always found that the most exciting. And I think the reason why like I bring that up is I think you can just be okay with just kind of trusting that something good is going to come out of it. If you do something good that resonates with you, you just have to hope that it resonates with other people. And the last thing I'll say is that community, it's not one of those like build it and they will come type things. I think a lot of people are like, oh, cool, like we're going to have a community now. We set up a forum and a Discord server and like, heck yeah, we got a community now. And like, it's really, really hard. It takes consistency. It takes like constantly putting out interesting new things. It takes both like following the rules, but also doing things differently. And it's just consistency. And that's not my strong suit because like early on, I'm not great at the consistency thing. And early on, it can be like kind of depressing. And you have to kind of understand that the community isn't like people who are going to send your forums and chat and ask questions, because they have other things going on, especially for a dev tool. Like, most people don't care about your product in the best way possible. They just want to do their jobs and get back to their lives, their families, maybe their company, like whatever happens to be that they're excited about. And so you have to like kind of have a different opinion of what like community is. But kind of once you're okay with that, and like once you're okay with like, okay, community is not like, a bunch of friends. It's just people who like, you can kind of like meaningfully touch in different ways. It becomes a little bit less exhausting and more just kind of like, oh, this is actually really nice.
Yeah, and I can imagine that a tool like yours, it's documentation is not something that people necessarily get very excited about. So it's like one of those things that if it works really well, then people don't notice it, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's That's one of the kind of the worst things about running any company is that almost to a certain extent, the better you do, the more people like don't realize how much work went into it. One of the things that we did at our last conference was I hired a magician to do a talk with me, and he was an illusionist who designed illusions. Like he does the magic, but he also like designs it. And I always thought there was a gigantic parallel that I wanted to suss out between what it's like to build, I'm going to say developer tools, but actually a company, and also a magic trick, which is it's magic. There's no such thing as like real magic. So any magician, we all know that when you go into a magic show, it's like we know that they are following the same laws of physics that we are and all that. But what's really fascinating is how they can like. My favorite quote about magic, or my favorite quote about anything ever, but it's about magic, and it's from Penn and Teller, is sometimes magic is just spending more time on something than anyone would reasonably expect. And that's one of my like, kind of guiding principles about whether it be starting a company or a dev tool or anything like that, which is that the reason it feels so great, like you mentioned Stripe before, like there's thousands of companies that you can like really love. Like, Slack's another one that I think just kind of works and it's so obvious. And like, it doesn't feel like it's obvious, right? Or sorry, it doesn't feel like it's like, it feels so obvious. It's like, oh, I could have created Slack. It's like a chat bot, or chat software. And like, what's so fascinating is like how much work goes into these things to make it feel obvious and easy. And that was, I'm not going to go through the whole talk about the with magician, but like that was kind of the premise of it was like it's a lot of like hiding stuff and like practicing and like making you're still following the same rules, but what do you show and what do you hide away? And I think that goes into a company as well, where it's just it's it's so hard to do something easy, and then when you do something easy, like no one really realizes. You just want to be like, look how like I made this so easy for you. It took me like 7 days of my life to like make this button one click instead of twos, and everyone's like, cool. And like it like hurts a little bit, but again, it's go back to like the conference thing. So you have to kind of trust the process. You have to kind of really trust that you can't get credit for each little thing, and that's totally okay. Like what you do is you get credit for the thing as a whole, and people can't articulate why. And like as a creator, I want people to like sit there and like be like, I would love it if like my work was dissected, similar to like an artist from 500 years ago, where like there's historians poring over like the little details that made it special, and like that's very egocentric, and that's never going to happen, of course. But like you have to just believe that people are going to like enjoy and love the experience as a whole, and you have to like believe that each little bit is kind of what contribute, even if people can't articulate each individual little thing.
Yeah, such a great point that the decisions and the hard work that goes into making something seem magical, kind of the better you are at it, the more it fades into the background.
And so one of our values at ReadMe is always make the compass spin. And it comes from a YouTube video by a YouTuber named Tom Scott. And he made it about a TV intro he saw 30, 40 years ago when he was young. So probably actually 20 or 30 years ago. But and basically it was before like CGI was a thing. And like one of the things was like this, like it's a opening. It was a one-time opening. It was only on TV once. It wasn't like Hulu and stuff didn't exist, so it wasn't replayed. It was just on TV once, and it was there's like a lightning bolt strikes this thing and a compass spins in the background. And like his whole point was like no one would have been mad if the compass didn't spin. Like, but someone cared so much and they put so much time and effort into it that they like figured out how to make the compass spin with like magnets and all that. And like my definition of making the compass spin is there's certain things out there that no one would notice if you didn't do it. But the fact that you do it kind of just adds to the final experience and all that, and like brings it all together and makes it feel special. And it's really hard to justify that, especially at bigger companies or when a customer like really just wants X or stuff like that. But I've always been a big believer those like little details like really go a long way and make a big difference.
Agreed. So how do you prioritize that? Because if you're looking at it on the roadmap, rationally speaking, you have all these customer requests and you have your product roadmap of all the features you want to build and a strategic roadmap. How do you prioritize surprise and delight features, or these kind of going the extra mile to build something that maybe doesn't have direct utility, but when they all add up together, it shows that you really care and that you go the extra mile?
Yeah. I'm going to kind of answer a slightly different question, but the same end result is we put so much time and effort into our interview process from start to finish. Like little things like every single email we've ever sent out to a candidate is like handwritten by someone. And not just like a insert one sentence here, like, oh, I saw you blah, blah, wrote, like did this recently. Like we like really care, and our thing is like if we can't find anything like to write about them, then why are we even emailing them? The like everyone like when they start, like we just work really hard, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but like there's a lot of little details we do when you get started, and like by the end of the process. So when you start the process, most people either don't know us or are apathetic. And that's not a shot at my company. It's just, I think that's true about everything. Most people already have a job. They're already probably pretty happy with it. And, we see it as our job to get them from like neutral, or even sometimes not negative, but just like definitely not positive, to positive by the end. And it's kind of a self-selecting process, which, the people where like the little details, and there's tons of little details we do throughout the process that like really resonate with people. Like, first of all, it's just like attracting the people who already love that kind of stuff. That's a huge part of it. And two is like, this is our first, well, maybe our first introduction to them was our conference, or maybe our first introduction to them was they used our product. But our first introduction to them is the people that we're going to spend the next 2, 3, 5 years of our lives with is the interview process. And I think like it sets the tone really early on. Like we put a lot of effort and time and care into like these little details. And then like the best candidates we have, like one of like the things that like always stands out to me is the ones we end up hiring like tend to like understand, like we said before, like people don't really understand, like they're the ones who like tend to understand, like, oh, like, and like bring up like they notice like these little details and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think part of it is just finding the right people who like this already resonates with. You can't like, how do you, outside of being like, okay, you get a $500 bonus if you like add whimsy to like, how do you quantify that? How do you like, then you have everyone just like adding like, actually I love confetti bursts, and even though it's cliche, but like there's people like adding confetti bursts everywhere, or like, we have an owl mascot, and like putting, owls on everything. Like you can't like force this whimsy or whatever, this delight. But I think like, everything we do, I think to kind of slightly rephrase my answer is like, you can incentivize it, but like you can't really incentivize it. All you can really do is like just make it very clear every step of the way that it's valued to the company. If you walk into an office for your first day at work and like, the desks are all like bought at IKEA and like the walls are all just like, white, and there's nothing like special, or there's no like anything like that. Like it's really hard to like think like, oh, this is going to be rewarded here. This kind of like adding a little bit of whimsy or delight to things. And it just has to be like everything we do has to kind of have like that little bit of delight and stuff like that, because it just kind of continuously confirms like this is important to us. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's my best attempt at getting the ballpark.
That's a great point, that if you hire people that care about it, it'll happen on its own without having to build systems around it, as opposed to the other way around, where if you hire people that don't necessarily care or value those concepts, no matter the incentive, it's going to be kind of forced and it's not going to be organic, right? And the last point I thought was really interesting, that the design of the office reflects the values of the business, and they say you ship your org chart. There, I forgot who
Conway's Law.
Conway's Law, thank you. So you also kind of you ship your office in a way, right? And it reminds me of like Amazon in the early days. Door on it, exactly. Yeah. The door as the desk. Shipping frugality and passing value to the customer, versus Apple, where they built like this spaceship in Cupertino, where I don't know how much they spent on the specific brushed chrome of the doorknobs, and that reflects in this product as well.
And both are billion-dollar companies. They just did different ways, and like I've always felt like you could like pick two companies and like drop me off in the office and like cover the logos and like the colors and stuff, and like you could easily tell which company it is, because it's just so clear what the company values by like, is it like you said, is it frugal? Is it do they like, is it so like our vibe at our office, which I'm not in, even though it looks officey, but our office looks just like this, is brick walls everywhere and stuff like that, and like owls and plants. But I wanted our office to feel like high quality and thought through, but also like lived in. I didn't want to feel like you're going to like a Blue Bottle Coffee or like an Apple store and it's like I can't touch anything. Like I wanted people to feel like, and I think that translates to the product. I think the product feels that way as well. I think most offices and the products like feel very similar. And I think I just don't, it's one of my most fascinating like things, like looking at offices, because you can just see like how easily it every single second you're just like absorbing what the company values based on like what's around you, and like it's just so clear to you.
Very cool. Just for quick reference, give people a sense of how big your company is right now. Yeah. What's the team size?
We're at 55-ish people.
Okay, cool. And you raised a Series A few years ago, right? 2019?
Yeah, 2019. Yeah. So this is 2023 now. So 4 years ago. So it's been a while.
Got it. Are you preparing to raise another round, or you guys are kind of cash flow positive, or?
Yeah, we're cash flow positive. It's a never say never thing. It's not that I wouldn't raise money again, but I I've never found raising money to be the goal, and especially because I think obviously the more you raise, a few things happen. Like you raise expectations for the company, which is totally fine because you also get a lot more money to make that happen. You do dilute people, like obviously in theory, bigger pie, smaller slice is fine, but at the same time, it's a lot of stress. You burn through people, I think, a lot. Like there's these high expectations, especially like when you get a new round. It's and that's kind of what caused a lot of like the layoffs and stuff like that recently and things like that. And my guiding light is I've never wanted to make a decision based purely on money. Obviously, a lot of decisions I make are very highly influenced by money, and money is a gigantic part of my day every day. But I never want to do layoffs, and during all this time we never had to, which was really great. There was external talk and pressure about it and and stuff like that, but like it was always a hard no for me unless like we desperately needed to, because I never want to make decisions based on that. So I've always kind of treated raising money as a tool, and it's one of many tools. And it can be used really well. It can be used really badly. I've seen many companies do incredibly well because they raise money, and lots of it. I've seen a lot of companies that the founders and the employees spent years of their lives like just desperately trying to like catch up with a valuation that they're never going to grow into and things like that. So yeah, I think it's very nuanced. I do think that one of the hardest things I would say no to raising money. So we I'll get a lot of inbound about investment, especially recently, where it's like, oh, you're cash flow positive, like that's great. Whereas like not the same people, but like VCs, a year before were like cash flow positive, like go big or go home. But I think it's when you go to like TechCrunch or any news article or Twitter and stuff like that, people are celebrating like these growth milestones, which is really great. But I think sometimes like it gets too intoxicating to be like, oh, it was so much fun to raise our Series A. Like we got a gigantic party. Like there was a bunch of articles written about us. Like people heard about us. Like it was a lot of fun. But like I can see how it's like addicting. I can see how it's kind of like a drug where it's like, okay, we need more of this, more of this. And I don't begrudge anyone who raises money at all. I don't begrudge anyone who bootstraps. Like I think every company has their own decision to make. The only people that I really, and begrudge is not the right word, but like that I like worry about is the ones who like are just like, okay, every 18 months we have to raise for the sake of raising, because that's just not a great reason to do it. I've always believed there's 3 reasons to raise money. One is you're doing hardware, so you just need that capital up front. 2 is it's a winners take all market and you're competing with someone, and you have to outspend your competitors, otherwise you're going to get destroyed. Or 3 is you have like a very clear lever, which is that I can put $1 in, I can get $2 back, or $1.20, or whatever it happens to be. And those are 3 like major reasons to raise money. And if you don't really have one of those 3 things, I really think it's worth, or there's a 4th, which is you're absolutely desperate and like you need the money and like it's that, or you lay people off. And that's not a great reason, but like you do what you have to do at that point. I've always kind of like none of those 3 has really resonate with me. So like if we have a competitor that comes along where it's like, oh, okay, actually like we really, really need to compete. Sure. Would love to, raise money again. Or if, we get to the point where it's like, okay, we found a way where like every dollar we put in, we get $2 back. And we just need more money. Again, would totally do it. And there's probably some other reasons in it that would convince me. But for the most part right now, like I just, we raise money when it feels right. And then I don't raise money when it doesn't. And so far it's treated us pretty well.
Yeah, and with regards to the that third lever, or the third reason, what you described as the lever, there are other forms of financing for
debt financing.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have the machine working,
exactly, and it's a lot less risky. Like the nice thing about raising money is that as long as you're ethical, most VCs, any good VC is not going to begrudge you for losing the money. Like that's the bet. But at the same time, it's like the returns expected is like it's a pretty big loan that you're taking out, and it's again you have, and you don't have to do it. There's a few companies that have done it, but like if you look at it, most companies have raised money. There's very few great examples of bootstrap companies out there, like purely bootstrap that have never taken money. I think it's just the answer is balance more than anything else. It's not VC's good or bad or bootstrap's good or bad or anything like that. I think it's just whatever you're looking for. Work backwards. For me, what I'm looking for is like, I don't want to build the world's biggest company or anything like that. I don't want to. I want my employees to make money off this eventually, which means I want to like de-risk it as much as possible, and I want to grow as much as possible. But I also kind of have always assumed that I always not assume, but I always go by the belief off the belief that it's going to eventually go to zero and no one's going to make any money. And like, how do I work backwards and make it so that like it's not wasting years of people's lives for like a paycheck that could never come? As time's gone on, it's become more obvious that like, we're going to have some sort of exit. Like, things are fine. Like, back in like when we were just starting out, it was like a very low chance. Now it's, a significantly higher chance that we're going to be fine. But it's it reminds me of the quote from you posted on Twitter from your 10-year-old that was like, "We're not failing. We're just halfway to succeeding," or something like that. I thought that was a great way to look at it. But yeah, like my whole thing is I just wanted to build a place where people enjoyed working and all that. And I think most people don't love their jobs these days. And I wanted a company that felt kind of like the 2080, like when 2008-ish companies that I worked at, updated for now in a lot of ways, but like that, like just kind of that, like I used to enjoy work. And I think as time goes on, I've seen fewer and fewer people around me enjoy their jobs. And most of work at ReadMe is not the most fun. Like it's not people are sitting there having a ton of fun, but everyone has to work. And while people are working, I want it to be as fun as possible. And so I kind of work backwards. Like if that's my goal, what kind of fundraising strategy works best for that?
Got it. It's clear that making the company a great place to work is one of your priorities, if not the priority. As a leader, you're really focused on culture and hiring the right people and building the right culture intentionally. How do you go about doing that? And what do you think most startups get wrong in that arena?
Yeah. So the thing I look for the most is curiosity. That's never, led me astray. Someone who like is just wants to understand why things are the way they are. And the reason is that if you're the kind of person who is that type of curious, rather than being like, oh God, I hate the sales team. They keep selling stuff that doesn't exist, or like being on the sales team thinking like, the engineers won't build what we need to build, like stuff like that. Like you start to like have that curiosity, like why, and why, like want to understand, and like you kind of like go out of your way to understand, and it breeds kind of empathy that I really like at the company, where you realize that you're on the same team. Because I think the weirdest thing that I never realized starting a company was that the biggest enemies tend to be inside at a company, like the friction and stuff like that. Like when I started the company, I thought like, oh, my competitors will be our biggest enemy, but the biggest enemy isn't, and I use the word enemy, but it's not, I don't mean like any individual person's enemy, but like just kind of like the biggest thing that can kill a company is not competitors. It's like that internal friction or that internal like strife. And like most people at my company, every other company, they spend 90% of their time, like disagreements aren't with competitors or like that. It's like, with coworkers, and anything we can do to kind of, and I'm really, really lucky that like, everyone in my company is just the most genuine, kind, nice person ever. So like, that's not a real issue that we struggle with, but like, it still pops up from time to time where it has to, because people like everyone has different directives and goals. And sometimes those directives and goals row up against other people's directives and goals. And that's the way it is. So I really love that curiosity, because like that curiosity is the difference between like, a fight, which never happens at my company, or like, people like competing with each other to like for promotions and stuff like that. Like, I think a lot of companies can be very like cutthroat. And I think with people who are like very empathetic and stuff like that, and everyone's empathetic in their own way, by the way. There's like a certain brand of empathy that we kind of try to really dig up and find. That's worked really well for us. You had a second part of the question. I don't remember what it was, but maybe I answered it.
What other companies fail at in building their culture? Like what's common mistakes that other startups specifically are making?
Yeah, I think this is a cliche one. It's a common, and I hate giving out advice that kind of like is pretty well trodden. But I think one of the biggest things I see people do is like really care about some sort of prestige. Not necessarily even colleges they went to, because everyone's like, oh, we don't care about colleges, but like even like companies they worked at and stuff like that. And what I think is so interesting is like those companies that you want to hire someone from, like we talked about Slack a few times, like everyone wants to hire from like Slack, right? And that totally makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to hire from Slack? But you're 5 years before where Slack is at the time you're hiring. And so are the people that you're trying to hire. So they're probably not right for you. Like Slack didn't become big by hiring a bunch of like famous people. They found like, some people are famous, like Stuart had success, the CEO, but like, and there's a lot of people there that had like some prestige, but like, I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine they're going around trying to find like the best person at marketing and the best person at sales. Like I think they would try to find people that like could become the best. And I don't want to be a company that like hires people who have made their careers elsewhere. Like I want to be a company where people like kind of make their careers and then go on to their next jobs. And like, like it would be, what would make me really happy is if, years from now, people are like, oh, like they work at ReadMe or they used to work at ReadMe. Like, oh, like that's an easy hire. Like definitely. Or people go to the recruiters. Like we just want to hire people like people who work at ReadMe.
Because of the selection value that you chose them, or because of the value that they accumulated by working at ReadMe?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Definitely not the former. Sorry, I said a little bit of both, and I said definitely not the former. I mean, obviously, like a little bit that, but I don't want this like, it's not like, oh, I want to be a kingmaker type thing. It's more, I think the best companies tend to have a very strong point of view about something. So, like for example, I don't know everyone who works at Slack, but like I can guess what they're kind of like, what they value, what they don't value, stuff like that. I think one thing that's kind of, and this is a complete pivot from everything we're talking about, but I always am so fascinated, like how important, in hindsight, how important your first one or two companies you work at are. And how quickly, just like, because I always, you always hear the thing about like friends, like you're the sum of the five friends you spend the most time with, or whatever. But like, I don't know about you, but I spend way more time with like my coworkers, and like just like there's like the high level stuff that you learn, like, oh, I learned a new programming language, stuff like that. But like, there's so many like values that just seep in really early on, like what you care about, what you don't. Like very rarely, and it doesn't matter who the person is, like very rarely does someone go from Uber to like, Slack, let's say, or like even, I think Stripe's a great company, but like I think Stripe's a really great company, but like it's not the same type of person who's attracted to Stripe's attracted to ReadMe, and that's totally fine. Because they're great people who work at Stripe, but they like value things slightly different than ReadMe. And I've always found that really fascinating, that like, how just so much is like the things you like. For me, my first job was a few startups, which is I love more than anything. And then my first job was Mozilla, and they're a nonprofit. They make Firefox for people who don't know. And I just loved it. Like I loved the people there. I loved everything about it. And so much of like my things I learned like about hiring and treating employees and stuff like that came from there. And I there's something like I can't even like begin to articulate like all the little things. Like I couldn't even write a book about it because I don't. It's so like deep in my like psyche, I think. And so that's why I always advise people to like early on in their careers like really care. And I know that not everyone gets the opportunity to really care and stuff like that. But if you have the opportunity to care, like it's super important.
I'm glad you brought up Mozilla. I've heard you previously talk about your role there and the fact that you, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but
Go
were
for it.
unqualified for the role, or perhaps they took a flyer on you. I was going to ask how much of that experience going through it on the other side, where this company took a chance on you. Maybe you didn't have as much experience as another candidate, but you flourished in the role, and obviously you showed a lot of promise and have continued to excel in various roles. How much of that experience informs how you hire today, and how you think about who to choose as in the hiring process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was so it was my first job, and I think you always like when you hire someone right out of college, like you look for different things. You're looking for potential, not previous skills and what they've done. And yeah, I mean, I took a lot of my hiring beliefs, both like actual things he has said, and also just things that have kind of like seeped in over the years from the head of web dev there. His name was Mike Morgan, or still is Mike Morgan, but he doesn't work there anymore. And he, I don't like. He kind of always talked about this concept of like, there's two kinds of people that he always looked for more than anything else, which was people that like just had like raw talent that hadn't been like found by anyone else. And second is he called them diamonds in the rough, which are people that were a little more into their career, but worked at a company you never heard of. And like, for whatever reason, they just kind of like ended up at this company that, and other recruiters passed by them because like, I've never heard of this company. They've been there for 4 years. Like, and like, there's so many great people out there like that. And those are kind of the two people I really look for. And it takes a lot of extra work, right? Because like that's why like first phone screens, I still do, either me or the hiring manager does every first phone screen. We don't use recruiters to talk to people because not that recruiters can't be good at their job, but like the person who's hiring for the role is going to have like so much more like a gut for like what they're looking for, and whatnot, and kind of like find people that maybe would be missed based on just looking at resumes and stuff like that. If we were a gigantic company like again Stripe, we could do it the way that everyone else does, which is like, just take the best people that are applying and like you kind of get your pick of people, right? But like for a company like ReadMe, which I love, but like, we're not a top 100 or top 10 places to work or anything like that, according to like, anywhere. it's it's you have to like work harder to like find really great special people that are a great fit. So it takes a lot of extra work, but it ends up being worth it.
You guys are small but impactful, right? That's the line.
Oh, definitely. And like for me, it was like Mozilla. Like it wasn't that I was underqualified for anything. It was my first job, so like I was I don't know what I was, but yeah, it was. I was. I think I just cared a lot, and I think that I just like was excited to try new things. And like I got hired as a PHP developer, and I used Windows at the time, and my editor was like, I just like, and then like I got there and like I never used Git before. I had never used. They switched to Python between me accepting the job and me starting, so I had to learn Python. I had to learn Git. I had to learn. Like a bunch of other random things, Postgres. Like there's so many skills I didn't have, and like I learned Vim for some reason while I was there, and I just learned so much so quickly. And it never frustrated me that I didn't know stuff. Like the thing that's always served me the best is that I've always believed that it could be done and that I could do it. And that's like a bit of unearned confidence. I don't mean it in like an egotistical way where like I can do anything, but like the thing about computers that's really fascinating to me is that they're all Turing, like any programming languages. And I'm going to like, this is not completely true. So anyone who like has a CS degree is going to listen to this and be like, it's not true completely. But basically, every programming language is Turing complete. And what Turing complete means is, I'm going to really generalize here, but it means that it can do anything, the way the state machine works. And I'm glossing over the technical stuff so quickly, but I always found it so fascinating. So like, I've always believed that anything could be possible. Now it might be a lot harder. And like the thing that every developer tool isn't really enabling stuff in a technical perspective. It's enabling things in the usability perspective, because at the end of the day, the computer is just reading ones and zeros and it gets compiled down. And like, every language that you use is built on top of another language, which is built on top of another language. And it's like this, like, it's just kind of combining and making it easier for humans. And I'm talking about like programming languages, but like that's any tool that is out there. And I think I've always had this belief that like anything is possible. Some things are just a lot harder. And I think it served me really well over the years, which is that, I never kind of debate like, could we do it? Is it even possible? It's more like, well, it's definitely possible. Like we just have to figure out how to do it. And that saves a lot of time. Also, it's a little foolhardy sometimes, but like that's always my mentality, and it's worked really well, because it's like this mentality of kind of like, yes and, or like it's not this like unearned bravado that I walk into a room and I'm like, I could totally do this. It's more of a like that curiosity I talked about before, which is like, I bet I can do this. It's definitely possible. Other people have done it. And it's kind of like when you have that mindset of like, yeah, I can do it, or like it's possible, then like you don't have that roadblock of like, every roadblock feels like an obstacle you're trying to get past, not a sign to turn backwards. And I think that's kind of really helped me over the years.
Incredible. I want to shift gears for a bit. I research every guest and company before the episode, and with you, as I was digging, the more I dug, the more interesting I found the random stuff that you build all of these really interesting projects. And your one thing that I found super unique is how a lot of founders are talking about, rah rah hustle kind of culture, shouting about successes and things like that. And you have a really thoughtful approach about founder burnout specifically, and just generally mental health in startups. I'd love to dig into that a little bit, because I think for everybody's detriment, it's not talked about enough. So what's your perspective on founder burnout? I know that you've done a few really interesting things to kind of deal with it for yourself. Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing to kind of start out with is, I've never met a happy founder, and I'm sure there's a bunch out there that I haven't met yet. But most I have, and they can be happy in a lot of ways in different parts of their lives and stuff like that. But like, it's not a job that, it's a very demanding job. And there's always something that's exhausting. And I think like most people who do their first company, and this is true especially about first time founders, because I think second time founders, they kind of start to realize like, okay, this was, I got to know what to avoid. But like I got into ReadMe for the wrong reasons. Like I started ReadMe for a lot of reasons, like the product stuff, but like, why did I want to start it? It was because like I love programming, I love design, I love like all these little things. And I was like, I get to do all of it. Like, there's no job out there where I get to do like, and I like to talk to people, and there's like I get to do all of it. And like, that doesn't end up being true. Especially, a lot of on your podcast, a lot of people like say like, I think the number one thing that people, I mean, you know more than me, but like that I heard when you ask like, what's something you've learned, it's that like concept of delegating. And that concept of delegating, like, sure, it's a good skill to have, but it also means that like you're slowly giving away the best parts of your job, and the stuff that you love and you like the most. Because when you start a company, it becomes very it's very much like you. That's just how it happens. Like the things you value, the company values, and like those things that tend to work well and are going well, and those are the first things you hire to like put more fuel on that fire. And like all of a sudden, you lose all the fun stuff that you love doing, and you end up doing like just a lot of like things that aren't fun, which is totally fine. That's the job, and like I'm very happy to do the not fun stuff. But like it's if you ask me like what my job would be like before I started, I think I had a very different idea of like where I'd spend my days. And that's one problem. And the second is like there's just so much rejection too. And I think that's the thing that like really wears on people. Even if you're doing really well, really successful, stuff like that, like there's so much rejection, whether it be customers churning or customers, deciding not to use you, or you're trying to hire someone and they choose a different offer, or someone leaves the company, or you're trying to raise money. And like, even when things are going well, like I remember, so we did a Series A and like it went well. We got a few term sheets from great people and ended up going with Excel, which, I was my number one choice by far. And so it went well from the outside, but like just the insane amounts of like micro rejections or like flat out rejections that happened during that time, like it was just exhausting. Like, this is a little probably TMI, but like I had like welts on my body just from like stress and stuff like that. And like my hair started to fall out. Like it was just so miserable. And like it went well. Like, and I think most, if you read the TechCrunch article, it's like, oh, that went really well. Good for them. And like, it was the most miserable period of my life, by far. And that's probably a huge reason why I haven't raised money again, because I don't want to again. But it was miserable. And like, everyone has the same story. Not that same story, but like this similar stories around like just being like overwhelmed and exhausted and tired. And like, you don't get to have a bad day because things trickle down so quickly. So like I have many things that I am proud of, but I have even more things that I'm not so proud of. And the hardest thing with starting companies, like I said before, it's like kind of like in your image. So it's like everything's so your good skills are amplified, which is great, but your bad things are also amplified. Because at the end of the day, like you're the one who kind of like rewards certain things. And like, it's so exhausting, like to realize that like you can't have a bad day, because when you have a bad day and when you're like down, like so is everyone around you. They just kind of like sink around you. You're like, oh, that's so weird. Like when I realized that, like, because just then it becomes a spiral where it's like, well, everyone around me is down and like all this, and it's tough. And it's just tough. So like, I don't know. I don't have much to say in a good way, other than like, I think it's just very true that everyone's going through it. I think you also notice that like on Twitter and stuff, there's a lull in advice. Like the people who give advice, like you look up what they're doing, they either have like, very few followers, or sorry, very few, like they're not like, it's not they might have a lot of followers, but like very few, like smaller companies are getting started, all that. Or, they've done it and like, they've exited and they have advice again. But like, there's like this, like, from like between like, 10 employees up to like 200, where there's just like there's just no information out there. Like people don't really tweet that much because it's like, you don't have anything to say, because you start to realize it's all nuanced and like, it's all a lot harder than you thought. And like, there's no such thing as like a quippy, like, rule that you can follow by, because, everything's different. And like, I might be able to say like early on, I might've said like, oh no, we never listen to customers. We build what we want to build and stuff like that. And like, the worst thing you can do is like, a large customer, like, listen to them too much. You can say that, but then it's like, we have to make decisions like, well, if we lose this customer, then I have to lay two people off. Like all of a sudden it's like, well, that's that quippy advice, like doesn't really help you that much anymore. And like you try to balance it, and it's all very nuanced. So I think it's just kind of, it's a very lonely experience, because, I'm surrounded by great people that I love working with. And like most of our team has been there for a very long time. Like, we have an 8-year anniversary coming up in 2 weeks. Like people have been out for a very, very long time. I've seen people go from like, starting my company to like, getting married, having kids, all that fun stuff. And it's, so I have people that I really depend on, I couldn't do without, and I really trust and love, but like, it's still very lonely at the same time. And there's so much pressure and all that. So I just threw a lot at you. I don't know if you want to talk about anything specifically or whatnot, but yeah.
Well, I was teeing you up to say it, but I'll bring it up, specifically the escape room that you built. I thought that was super cool, just because it's so random, and I happen to be a huge fan of escape
really?
rooms. So yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you won't be able to do mine because it's out of business now. But because of COVID, I shut it down. But yeah, I was really burnt out like 5 years ago, give or take, or it's longer than that, 6 years ago. well, why was I burnt out back then? That was so easy back then, but I was burnt out, and I want something else to work on because again, I was spending all my day in meetings and stuff like that, and I liked escape rooms. The reason I like escape rooms for a lot of reasons, but like I think it's a competitive thing, but everyone's on the same team, which I really like. Like I don't like competitive things where someone has to lose. I love things where like, at work we do it a lot, or my girlfriend at the time we do a lot of escape rooms. Like it was just a lot of fun to like figure things out together and like be on the same team. And pretty quickly though, like you've done a lot of them, like you start to like understand like kind of the patterns and the tropes and stuff like that, and they become like a little bit easier because the joy of an escape room is not solving the puzzles, it's figuring out what the puzzle is. But then you're step back, 'cause you've done a lot of them, so you start to know what they are. So like I was like, I could like in my head, I just started like while I'm doing escape rooms, I started like designing one in my head and not really planning on doing it. And I was burnt out, and I just wanted something that was like physical and real. Yeah, in San Francisco, I rented an art gallery space, like an old art gallery, and built an escape room. It ran for 2.5 years or so. It's called Startup Escape. So I was like, I didn't get too far away from, what I know. But you had $1 million, which is 1 hour to launch your startup or to escape. And there was 5 tracks: design, programming, DevOps, marketing, and product. And you had like, there's 5 tracks, you had to do all 5, and like people could split up and all that. And yeah, building that was so much fun. And like I used to like work there as well on nights and weekends sometimes and pick up shifts, and that was a lot of fun. Just like meet people and work with people and all that. And yeah, that was one of the things I did. I took a week off to like start it off, and I built half of it in a week, and then like the second half took the rest of the year. But it took a long time to build out. But that was a ton of fun. So like I've always tried to find like different things that like balance me out. Because I know what I love. I love building things. I love making things. I love like that tactile, like, some people kind of call it IC work, but like, just like, I like having very little between me and actually making something. And that's what kind of brings me joy and happiness. So I've always focused on like, how do I, when I get like into a rut, I'm always like, okay, how can I like, build something or make something or do something interesting? So yeah, I did that a few years ago. I shut it down, unfortunately, because of COVID, but someday I'll build another one.
So for you, that was a way to kind of stretch your creative muscles and get that experience, that joy, while continuing to work at the company, even though some of the parts of your new role as CEO maybe weren't as exciting or what you had intended, or they could be, but you just needed a change pace.
Yeah, it's I think it's, I mean, for me it's the time period that kind of correlates to kind of when we kind of went from like we started to get like product market fit, to kind of go back to the point of this thing. And like it's kind of like a lot of people talk about the 0 to 1 stuff, like I'm not a Peter Thiel fan at all, but like the concept of like going from 0 to 1 is something people talk about a lot. And but once you get to that 1, you kind of switch into like restaurant mode, which is like consistency. And like, yeah, you're still like layering new stuff onto it and being better, but like a lot of the company is just kind of focused on this like day-to-day repetitiveness. And that's not a bad thing at all. But like, I'm someone who like everything I do, I want to be new. So like I could never go out and be for a lot of reasons, but do sales, because like I would want to do something different every time. And like, it's that consistency that, builds a great, like, you do go to market stuff. Like I imagine like a lot of it is like 0 to 1 stuff, but a lot of it's just that consistency of like keeping things going that are working and stuff like that. And it's that's not what gets me excited or whatever. So like I need to find other ways to like build stuff, because otherwise the last thing I want to do is be that kind of the CEO who like walks in every Monday and be like, we're pivoting, I got a great idea, like, and like you just jerk everyone around, like that's exhausting. So like I wanted to find outlets where I could like both do new interesting things, but also and most of them tend to be like tangential to ReadMe, but like it doesn't like affect the whole company. I'm not like, all right, everyone, we're pivoting everything, because sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to like be like with conviction, be like, all right, we're going a different direction, but you can't do that every Monday, and that gets exhausting and tiring for people and burns people out. Like that's how people get burnt out. Is like, well, last week you told me to do this, and now I'm doing this. Like I'm exhausted and tired. So like now, like one of the things I'm working on is a children's book for about APIs, not necessarily for kids, but like for either for kids or people who like don't really understand what an API is, like my parents and stuff like that. And that's kind of a fun side project and stuff like that. So I always try to find like weird side projects to work on that kind of like give me the energy and creativity to bring back to the company that I can like do my day-to-day job.
Awesome. Last question on this topic. I know we're over time, so we're going to go to the lightning round in just a second. But specific to taking that much needed break, I know that recently you took a sabbatical as well, took a few weeks off. How do you do that as the founder practically? Like, do you have issues with investors saying like, "Hey, what the heck are you doing? I gave you money, and you're taking time off," or employees. How do you actually practically do it? Because I'm sure that there are folks in the audience that were like listening and saying, "You know what, that would be amazing," and I'm feeling some signs of burnout, and getting a refresher would be great, but I just don't know how to actually go about doing that.
Yeah, I took 6 weeks off, and I was really lucky that I was able to. The answer is pretty simple. I had hired great people, and it was possible. The reason I have been working at ReadMe for 8 years before I was able to take, about almost 9 actually. Geez, before I took any time off. It was my first time off ever. I take time off definitely, but like it was like that half taking time off, which was like I was still on call. I was still like answering emails and like looking at Slack and stuff like that. So it was, I've taken time off, but never that like, oh, I don't have to think about anything. And it was great, but it took a lot of work to get there. It took a lot of hiring great people that I trusted to do it. And I found a nice balance where like when I came back, nothing was broken, but people kind of were glad I was back. So that's the perfect amount of like, things didn't break when I was gone, but also like hopefully no one was like, oh, we don't actually need him. So it was a nice balance, I think. But yeah, I got really lucky that I was able to do it, and that I had people that could, make it so that it wasn't an issue at all. But that being said, like, I don't know, this is again, thing that I was able to do that it's very privileged, but like, I would early on, I would do things like I couldn't take time off, but I would, just take trips for a week by myself. Not often, and I'll go really bad places because I didn't have any money because I just started a company. So I'll go to like Reno, which was both my least favorite place on the planet, but also my favorite because like I just loved my time there because I could like work when I wanted to work, and like schedules didn't matter. Like you would like, work all night and sleep during the day, and it was Reno. So like everyone, like there's food and stuff to do. And like if you were like, lonely because you hadn't seen people, like you can go play like blackjack for an hour and like talk to someone random and move on with your life. And like I did that kind of like when I was just like so overwhelmed and felt like, everything was crushing down on me. Like it was just nice to kind of like get away from everything else and just like focus. And I was working the whole time. I was probably working more than I did otherwise, but like it was just nice to kind of like not have, it was just like kind of, it was so nice just to not have anything else, and I could just like catch up on all the various things, like writing code or answering emails or whatever else. So like I think you have to like, I got really lucky. I could take 6 weeks off, but it took me 8 years to get there. I think you have to find like clever ways. And again, I'm really lucky. I didn't have, kids or, a spouse or anything that that relied on me or anything. Like I was able to do stuff like that. But yeah, and like, you can't wait 8 years and I can't wait another 8 years for my next 6 weeks. Like I have to find other ways in there to find balance. But yeah, I have nothing to say other than I just got really lucky that I was able to do it. I know most people don't get that ability and can't. But I guess the last thing to say to answer your question is like nobody cared. Not a single investor cared. Because why would they? Things are fine. They know that they see a lot of founders. They know how hard it is. Every single one was incredibly supportive of it. Was very happy that I took time off because they're betting on the company, but also the founder. And if the founder, has a mental breakdown and spirals, like that's not great for anyone. So I think VCs are, and maybe it's not true about every VC, but I think especially the good ones are very cognizant of like how much effort and time and it takes to run a company, and like anything you need to do to, as long as you're not like doing anything bad, whatever you need to do to kind of like, keep yourself able to run this long marathon is they're usually pretty cool with it, as long as you can like, as long as there's no surprises, people tend to be pretty cool with stuff. So
such a great point. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you got to take care of yourself. Greg, I'm enjoying this so much, and I really appreciate the candor and just kind of sharing some of that inside scoop on your experience. But we typically close out with a lightning round.
Let's do it.
I'll ask you a few questions. Let me know what first thing that comes to mind.
Cool.
Sound good?
Yep.
All right. What book, newsletter, and or podcast do you find yourself recommending most often?
Ooh. Okay. I'm going to take this in a different direction. I'm going to say, so there's a TV show called Mythic Quest. It's on Apple. It's by a few of the people from Always Sunny. The fourth or fifth episode in, just out of nowhere, it's a completely different cast of characters. And it's an episode of TV, and it's a standalone story. The Mythic Quest itself is, yeah, I like it, but it's fine. But episode, I think it's 5, is called like A Dark Quiet Place, or Dark Quiet Death. And it's about this couple who meets, and they like build a company together and all this. And I recommend that to so many people because I think it does such a great job of kind of showing the journey from like, it takes place over like 10 years, I think, this like one episode. And you just kind of see like the early on, like that, like the joy, like why they started this like company. It's a game studio. So they started a game actually, but like it's basically a company. And like, then like how like the CEO, the founder, like how he like made decisions because everyone told him what to do, and like and all this, and like the company was so successful by the end, but he was like alone and miserable and like didn't have anything he wanted. And I can't give away the ending, but like I didn't give away all the ending. But it's just such a fascinating. You said I could cut stuff. Maybe that's what I want to cut is just the ending there. But no, that doesn't spoil anything. But like it's just such a fascinating. Like I find it such a great like piece of media for anyone who starts a company, because like, the social network's great to watch if you want to get like, jazzed stuff about like, what starting a company could be like or whatever. But like, I don't think it's like, really resonates with me as a founder. I think like this episode really, really did a great job kind of showing like that it's just such a common experience for people who are like creators to like, go through. So that's my recommendation.
Very cool. I've not heard of that, so I appreciate all new recommendations. So is it like a kind of a Black Mirror style separate stories in each episode, or is it just kind of a one off?
No. It's just like a run of the mill sitcom. It's really weird. And then like they just like out of nowhere they just had like one episode, and it's like one of the most poignant things that I've seen. And it's like, and I think that's, I mean, the downside is that, I think I was so caught off guard the first time I saw it that I was like, these aren't the characters. Like, what's going on here? And then like you watch it and like you start to realize like, oh, okay, like it happened 20 years before and all this. And so the show itself, no, it's just like it's a regular sitcom with like characters and like, storylines and stuff like that. And then like they just have one episode out of nowhere that's just like I think it was just, I mean, I actually do know why he did it. It was Rob McElhenney, who is one of the creators of Always, or the creator of Always Sunny, and he created this as well. And like his whole thing was like he talks to so many people who have this like burden from other people around them telling them how to do stuff. Like, for him, he's not running a company, he's running a show, but it's like notes and stuff like that, like VC or like, directors like, or sorry, like the studio giving you notes and stuff like that. And so you listen to them, and then like, the customers want this and all this. And like, it's just how you can like kind of become creatively bankrupt by just like, trying to do what you're supposed to do, rather than like doing what you want to do. I think it's kind of the moral he was trying to tell. And like, again, he's talking about TV shows. I'm talking about companies, and like the plot of the episodes about a video game. So it's like they're all like kind of creative endeavors that like have like a lot of people and a lot of money going into it, and like a lot of people who want to put their fingerprints on it, and like these pressures to like listen to other people, and like you think you're doing the right thing, but are you? And like how do you like, and his whole argument is like, outside of, I've heard interviews about it, it's like so many people like don't understand why they aren't famous, or like why it's not succeeding. It's because they like, listen to everyone else and like didn't stand up for their creative vision and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a great episode.
You've sold me. I'm going to check it out.
Cool. And everyone, by the way, everyone that I recommend it to, they have a different takeaway. So that's my takeaway, which is why I don't think it's a spoiler. Like I think like everyone has like taken something different from it. So and I think it's a great way to be.
Cool. Definitely going to check that out. Thank you. Looking into the future, let's say 5, even 10 years out, what's the grand vision for ReadMe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's, I kind of, when I started the episode, it was like, I never wanted to be documentation, but we had to build that first. Cause that's kind of like, you need to have all the features of the documentation platform in order to get to the next level. And like, maybe we could have raised more money. Maybe we could have like, maybe one of the best things we got was, so you had Ted on your podcast a few weeks ago, and he was actually our first enterprise customer. He worked at Box at the time, and I got really lucky that we got such a big name like so early on and stuff like that. And like that was great, but like also like it meant that like we're off to the races with enterprise deals like really early on. Like there's a lot of like different things, and they had like a lot of requests, rightfully so. But like there's a lot of really good things that happened to us early on that made it so that some of the grander vision kind of took a backseat for a little bit, and that's totally fine. But now we've got a good majority of the market. The product is really good. There's still things we need to do for the product, but like it's pretty good. And like now the things that I've been wanting to do, it's finally caught up, and that's what gets me really excited. Which is like not just telling people, but like showing, making more interactive, like showing you different things than me, because it's your first time in the docs and it's my 10th. How do we like really change how people think about APIs, and like and realizing that like it's not. No one cares about the technical complexity. They don't care about your API. They just want to do something. And how do you get people as quickly as possible to that? So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but like that's kind of what gets me excited. And it's weird that like I'm more excited about it now than I was 8 years ago, which is always a great spot to be, I think.
Yeah, very cool. What are your 3 favorite SaaS tools right now?
Ooh, okay, that's a tough one. I think My answers are going to be Raycast, especially with the new AI stuff on top of it. Linear is phenomenal. And I don't love this one, but I rely on a ton, is Superhuman. And I say I don't love it because at the end of the day, it's still email. But as far as email clients go, it makes it super easy. And it makes it so I don't have to overthink it. So those are my three answers.
Okay, I like it. Um, if you could have coffee with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Ooh. Okay, this is going to be kind of a lame answer, but I'm going to go Bill Lawrence. So Bill Lawrence is he created Scrubs, he created Ted Lasso, he created a bunch of other TV shows, and he's kind of been my like model for how I run things. And I just always love the way he thinks about things. I think he has a very good like all his shows. They're very different. Scrubs and Ted Lasso and a few other, like Shrinking, if you know that one. They're all very they have this like same belief that like things suck and life is really bad, but it's going to be okay. And like the way you get through it is kind of this like, just realizing that everyone's going through it as well. I think does a phenomenal job of like showing you every single show he does is the same trope, which is that it's tropey characters. It's like the bad guy, he's the boss, he's the father. Like it's all these like tropes. And then like slowly you see it from everyone's perspective. And like you ultimately end up realizing that everyone's just doing the best they can given their situation. And I've always found it to be such a, like I found Scrubs as such like it was my first week of college, such a pivotal time. And like, I started to read more about him and like, he worked with the same people like show after show and stuff like that. And like, the way he like helps people behind the scenes and stuff like that, I've always felt was really, I don't know. I really liked him, both his shows and the messages from it, and also like every podcast I've heard from him and stuff like that. So it's probably an easy one because I could probably just email him and like beg him to hang out with me because he's not a historical figure. He's a human being who's alive. But that's gonna be my answer.
Yeah, make that happen. Next time we talk, I want to know if you met with him.
Perfect.
All right, Greg, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. What's anything that we didn't cover that you want to share, or a piece of advice? Or literally anything that you want to close us out with, as well as if you can share your contact info. Of course, we're going to put the links in the show notes, but if people want to continue the conversation or learn more, yeah.
Yeah, I'll combine those two. If anything here kind of resonates with you or it feels like you're going through the same thing, I have no advice for you, but I am very good at listening. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm Greg at readme.io, readme.io. Would love to talk with anyone. I've been really lucky early on that I had people that were just happy to listen to me and that I reached out to that were great. Like I said, I have no advice other than I'm happy to listen and tell you that that's normal and everyone's going through similar things. And if you want to follow me, like definitely email me. That's my favorite way to talk to people. But if you want to find me from afar, Twitter is Koberger. And yeah, that's a great way to follow me. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Greg. Talk to you soon. Wishing you all the best with ReadMe, with everything else.
Thanks.